Masechet Baba Batra Daf Yod Gimel Velo Eta Tiraklin. The Mishnah said that if two people share a dining room or a living room, and one of them wants to split it, they can force each other to split it as long as it's big enough that after you cut it in half, still it can be used as a dining room or a living room. But if it's smaller than that, and then once you cut it in half, it's not going to be usable, then one of the partners cannot force the other partner to split it. And bahen kedeh lazeh uchdeh lazeh mahu. Now, what does this mean when the Mishnah says it's too small, not enough for this one and not enough for that one? So then what do you do if it's too small, right? So I can't force you to split it. So now, but what can I do? Rav Yehuda amar it dina degod o agod. Rav Nachman amar let dina degod o agod. Rav Yehuda says that we have the law of you will set a price or I will set a price. In other words, any one of the partners can force the other to do a buyout. Either you buy me out or I'll buy you out, right? We'll assess what the price is. How much is this dining room cost? $10,000. Okay, that's the price. So you have a choice. I don't want to be partners with you anymore, and it's too small to split, so therefore either you buy it for $10,000, if you don't want to buy it, I'll buy you out for $10,000. That's Rav Yehuda's position. Rav Nachman disagrees, and he says, no, we do not say that one party can force the other to make a buyout. Rather, they continue as partners. Since it's too small to split into two rooms that would be usable as living rooms or as dining rooms, therefore they just continue the partnership, and neither can force the other to split it, and neither can force the other to buy it or to sell it. Now we're going to analyze this machloket for the rest of the daf. Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman לדידחת אמרת לית דינה דגוד או אגוד בכור ופשוט שניח להן אביהן עבד ובהמה טמאה כיצד עושין? אמר לה שאני אומר עובד לזה יום אחד ולזה שני ימים. Rava asks Rav Nachman, according to you that you do not say that either you buy me out or I'll buy you out, what would you do in a case of when you have two brothers, one is a firstborn and one's not a firstborn brother, and the father died and left them a slave or a non-kosher animal? Well, what are they going to do with it? How will they split it? According to Rav Yehuda, no problem. They can sell it, and then they can split it the proceeds 2/3, 1/3, or one can sell it to the other, right? Either here, I'll sell to you for 1/3 the price, or you sell it to me for 2/3 of the price. Then that's an easy way to solve it according to Rav Yehuda. But according to Rav Nachman, who says, if one of them says, no, I don't want to, well, you can't split it in half, right? It's a person or an animal, you can't cut it in half. And one person cannot force the other to buy it out. So then, what do you do? How are you going to split? It's not like a field where you could work the field and then split the profits, right? Who's going to use this servant and who's going to use this animal? And Rav Nachman says, I have an answer. There's no problem. He can work for the regular brother, the non-bechor, for 1 day, and he can work for the bechor for 2 days, and that way the firstborn gets a double portion, and they do share it. They keep the partnership going, even though it's a thing that can only work for this one or work for that one. So Rav Nachman says there's no problem. All right, so that solves the problem against Rav Nachman. Now we have a challenge against Rav Yehuda from a Mishnah in Masechet Gitin. Metibe, mi shechetzio eved bechetzio ben chorin, oved et rabo yom echad v'et asmo yom echad, dibre bet Hillel. בית שמאי אומרים, תיקנתם את רבו, את עצמו לא תיקנתם, לישא שפחה אינו יכול, לישא בת חורין אינו יכול, ייבטל, והלא נברא העולם אלא לפריה ורבייה, שנאמר, לא תוהו ברעה, לשבת יסריה. If you have a case of someone who is half a servant and half free, how could you have that? Let's say you have two people that own an Eved Kanaani together, and then one of those partners frees him. That's it, you're free. Now he's half free, and that free half is a full Jew, because the Eved Kanani that goes free it's like conversion, is a full Jew. And the other half is now a slave. So what is he going to do? How can he be half a slave and half a free person? Bet Hillel says no problem. he'll serve his master for one day, and then he does whatever he wants. He has freedom for one day, and that's how he splits his time. Bet Shammai, however, says, all right, that you helped out the master, because now the master has half a slave that he can work every other day, but you have not helped the slave himself, because what's he going to do? He can never get married. Can he marry another shivcha? He can't, because half of him is a full Jew, and the full Jew cannot marry a shivcha. Can he marry a Jewish woman? No, he can't, because half of him is Eved Kanani. Eved Kanani cannot marry a free Jewish woman. And so Yibatel, should he just not get married and not have a family? But the whole world was created for procreation, as the pasuk in Yeshaya says, Lo tohu bera'ai, did not create it as tohu vabohu. He didn't want it to be empty and a wasteland. He wanted the world to be inhabited. So there's a mitzvah to have children, and it's not fair to tell him, oh, you can never get married, you can never have children. So what are we going to do? Rather, the Bet Din will force the master, the one who still owns half of the servant, to free the other half of the slave. So now he'll be totally free. Now that master, he deserves compensation. The servant, he may not have money. So they'll write a contract, an IOU, for half of the value on the slave market, and the slave will say, he'll have to pay at some point. He'll have to pay the master for his value, but he deserves to. If he's half free, then he deserves to go totally free. That's Bet Shammai's solution. V'chazru Bet Hillel l'horot kedibrei Bet Shammai. When Bet Hillel heard what Bet Shammai said, he said, "You know what? You're right. It really doesn't make sense to keep him half a slave and half free, because he needs to have a right to get married." And therefore, you're right, we're going to sell him altogether. So what do we see? That in this case, it seems like only because we are worried about his procreating, that's why we tell the guy, oh, you have to sell your share. But if not, if you didn't have this overriding concern, and let's say it wasn't a human being, but just a property or an animal that they had between each other, then one would not be able to force the other to sell, right? Basically here, there are two partners, and when one frees them, we force the other one, no, you have to sell your share. Sounds like only in this case you force the other, but in any other case, then you would not force the other to sell their share. And so we see from here that we do not say God or Agod. This is a proof for Rav Nachman, a challenge to Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda, in all cases, you say one can buy the other out. So why don't we say the same thing here, even without the reason for procreation? If they jointly own this servant, so why don't they say they can buy each other out? Or the servant can buy himself, by his own freedom, right? That should be the normal procedure, according to you, that the slave can say, listen, I want to be free, I'm buying out your share. It shouldn't have to be only because of Piru Urvu. Rav Yehuda can answer, Shaneacha de'o agod, ika god leka. Rav Yehuda says, no, my rule of agod, which I do apply in most cases when there's a partnership, one has the right to buy the other out. That only is true when he can say, either I'll buy you out or you buy me out. They set a price, $10,000 worth. What do you want? You want it? Okay, you could take it $10,000. You don't want, that's not a good price. You don't want it. You don't have the money. Fine, I'll buy it. Only if it's both ways, then it's fair to force the other person to dissolve the partnership by buying or selling. However, in this case, the slave, it's only one way. The slave can buy his freedom, but he cannot sell his free half into slavery. He can buy his freedom because he's half a full Jew, and he can go to the master and say, listen, the other half that you own, I want, so that could be fully free. But there's no way, there's no mechanism for him to sell himself to someone as an Eved Kanani. He's already half free, half full Jew. You can't go from being a full Jew back to being an Eved Kanani. So he's half Eved Kanani, but he can't sell his free Jewish part back to be an Eved Kanani. So since here there's no chance for buying and selling, only for buying. So that's why the only reason why we can force the master to sell is because of the overriding principle of Piru Urvu. But if not, since it's only one way, then we would not be able to force him in if it was not for Peru Urvu. But in any case where it's a two-way street, where it's a possibility of buying or selling, then that would be totally fair to force one of the partners to buy or sell. All right, now another challenge against Rav Yehuda. Tashema, Shene achin echad ani ve'echad ashir, v'iniach lehen avihen merchas u'bet habad, עשה לשכר השכר לאמצע. עשה לעצמו, הרי העשיר אומר לעני, קח לך עבדים וירחסו במרחס. קח לך זיתים ובוא עשה בבית הבד. So this challenge is from a Mishnah later on in this Masechet. If you have two brothers, one is poor and one is rich, and their father died and left them either a bathhouse or an olive press. Now, if this was a business, so then that's fine. They can share it, and let's say they don't want to split it, and it's too small for each to force each other to split it, and won't be usable. So then they keep it together. And since it's a business, they will split the profits. People come to pay to come use the bathhouse, or they pay to use the olive press, and the rich and poor brothers split it. So there's no problem in that case. However, if it was for personal use, the father was a pretty wealthy guy, and he has a bathhouse, it's a luxury, and he used it for himself. So then, the rich person, this is all the Mishnah says, can say to the poor brother, listen, I think we should use it. I like to use it, and I bring my servants, and I get a nice bath over here. So if you want, you can also bring your servants. Now, the poor person doesn't really have servants, but the point is that the rich guy has a right to tell him, I'm going to use it for myself. You use it for yourself, and bring servants and let them use the bathhouse, or go get olives and come and use the olive press. I have lots of olives. I use it, so you can use it also. So the challenge is here. We do not say, the poor brother cannot say to the rich brother, no, I don't want to do that. I want to sell it. I want to sell it, right? And you have to buy it. You have to buy me out. No, we don't say that. Instead, the rich brother can say, no, I want to use it and I want to keep the partnership. So this would be a proof for Rav Nachman that if they don't both want to sell and it's too small to split in half, then they keep it as a partnership. It's a challenge to Rav Yehuda, because according to Rav Yehuda, the poor brother should be able to say, listen, I buy you out, you buy me out. Well, how can the rich brother force the poor brother to continue the partnership? And the answer here also is Hatam Name God Ika Agod Leka, like the principle that we just saw. Here, that really the buyout can only be one way, because the poor person cannot afford to buy the entire bathhouse or the entire olive press. So because it's not a sale that can potentially go both ways, so then it's not fair to force either one to have to buy it or sell it. And even Rav Yehuda only says two partners can force each other to buy or sell if there's a potential for either one of them to buy it or sell it. Then the one that is reluctant, the one that wants to do it, can say to the one that's reluctant, listen, it's your choice. Here's the price. If it's worth you to buy it, then take it. If it's worth it to you to sell it, then sell it. But here, the rich person cannot make that offer to the poor person. The poor brother is stuck because he has no option to buy it, and then it won't be fair. Good. Ta'ashema, kol she'ilu yechalek shemo alav holkin, im lav ma'alin oto bedamim. We now quote a baraita that is a challenge against Rav Nachman. The Mishnah, the baraita says that if there's an item that if you would split it, it would still be called the same name, meaning if you have a dining room and it's big enough that even when you split it in half, now you have two dining rooms, then one can force each other to split it. However, if not, if it's too small and once you cut it in half, then it's going to be a closet or a hallway, and you can't call it a dining room because it wouldn't be usable as such anymore, then one pays the other, right? Its monetary value is assessed, and they split the money, or one buys out the other. So you see, this is a proof for Rav Yehuda that you say God or Agod, one can force the other to do a buyout, and a challenge to Rav Nachman, who said that we keep the partnership. So how are we going to answer according to Rav Nachman? How is he going to deal with this baraita? The answer is Tana'ehi. Actually, the machloket between Rav Yehuda and Rav Nachman is parallel to a machloket between two Tanaim. And this baraita would be one Tana, and Rav Nachman can follow a different Tana, as we see in the following baraita. The Tanya. Tol ata shi'ur v'ani pachot shom'in lo. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer en shom'in lo. Let's say there was a field that was too small. It was only 7 amot long, and they want to split it. So one of the partner who wants to split it can say, listen, 7 by 7, if we split it evenly, is going to be 3.5 and 3.5. That's too small for use, and I can't force you to take 3.5. I'll tell you what, I'll give you 4, and I'll take 3. I don't mind. I'd rather have a small courtyard, less than 4 myself, and only 3, rather than share it with you. So in that case, we listen to him because the reluctant partner, he's getting 4, so it would be the same as if there was 8, and then I could force you to split it 4 and 4. So too, if I'm willing to take less, only 3, and you get 4, then that's fine. Whereas Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, we do not listen to him, and one cannot force the other, even though he's taking less for himself. He's only taking 3, and the other's getting 4, still not. That's the braita. Now, first we have to clarify what this means. Hechidame, what's the case? If we understand it exactly as we just explained it, what would be the reasoning for Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel? How could the partner who's getting 4 object? By what right does he have to object? If it was 4 by 4, then he can be forced to split it. So now that's 3 by 4, but he's getting 4. So what's the difference? He's still getting 4. He should be able to be forced to take his 4. How can he object? And alav chasure mechasra v'achika amar. Tolata shior v'ani pachot shemin lo. V'god o agod name shom'in lo. V'ata Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel lememar en shom'im lo. Rather, it must be that we're missing words in this baraita, and here's what it says. If it's only 7 big, and one of them says, I'll take less, I'll take only 3, you take 4, then he has a right to do that, and we listen to him, and we force the other guy to take only 4. But if the one who wants to split it says, let's fix a price, and either you buy me out or I'll buy you out. Also, he has a right to do that. So you see that would be Tanakama. Tanakama says, we say, God or Agod, the Tanakama is the same as Rav Yehuda. And then Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, I would agree with, if they all take 3, you take 4, that, yes, he has a right to do. How could you object? But regarding God or Agod, then we do not force him to, because a person can say, no, I don't want to buy it out. I don't want you to buy me out. I want to continue the partnership. He has a right to do that. So you see that Rashbag is the same as Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman can follow Rashbag. So there you go. You see, it's a machloket Tanaim. But we reject this. Lo le'olam katane. No, in fact, we can explain this baraita as we did before, that there's no case of God or Agod here. We're only talking about splitting it 3 and 4. Now you asked about that. Why would Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel possibly object to accepting, if one guy says, I'll take 3, you take 4, what can be the objection? Why can't he force him to take 4 and split it? Because the reluctant partner has a claim. He could say, listen, I know I'm getting a little bit of extra space. Now, what do you want for it? Do you want me to pay for it? I don't have money. I don't have money to pay you for the extra space, however much it is, extra amma that I'm getting, or half an amma, so I can't pay you. You want to give it to me for free? I don't want to take gifts. As the pasuk says in Mishleh, he who waits gifts shall live. You're going to give me a gift, and you're going to hold it over me. I owe you one. You're going to always remind me of it. I don't like taking gifts. I want to just keep it as is. And so it could be that Rashbag, in fact, is only talking about the case of splitting it 3 and 4, and not talking about a case of God and Agod, and therefore this machloket in this baraita is not parallel to the machloket we have between Rav Nachman and Rav Yehuda. If so, Rav Nachman has no Tana that he can hang his hat on, and we leave that as a challenge, because there was a baraita that was clearly against Rav Nachman, and so we don't answer that question. Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef, de Rav Yehuda de Shmuel hi. Abaye tells Rav Yosef that the opinion of Rav Yehuda, that one can force the other to do a buyout, follows the opinion of Shmuel. Rav Yehuda was a student of Shmuel and often teaches traditions in his name, and so that when Rav Rav Yehuda said that, actually, he was teaching what he heard from his teacher Shemuel. Ditnan, v'chitbeh hakodesh af al pi sheshenim rosim lo yachloku, ve'amar Shemuel, lo shanu ela bekerech ehad, aval b'shnei kerichot cholkin, v'yisal kadatech let dina degod o agod, ma'irya bekerech achad, afilu b'shnei kerichin nameh. The proof is from what Shemuel says about our Mishnah. The Mishnah taught that if two people agree to split a small field and they both agree, fine, then you split the small field even down the middle. But when it comes to a holy scripture, to a scroll, let's say two people jointly own a chumash of Sefer Bereshit, a scroll. And even if they both want to split it, right, they both agree, you can't split it. You can't take it and cut it down the middle. I'll take the first 25 chapters and you take the rest, because that's disrespectful. You have a chumash, you have to keep the whole thing intact as a whole. Now, Shemuel said about this Mishnah that this limitation is only when there's only one volume, there's only a Sefer Bereshit. But let's say they jointly own two volumes, two scrolls, a Sefer Bereshit and a Sefer Shemot. Then, right now we're understanding that they can force each other to, one can force the other to split it. So listen, I'll take Bereshit, you take a Shemot. Now, if you think that we do not say God or Agod, then why would you say that the limitation is only on one volume? You cannot. Even for two volumes, one would not be able to force each other to split it. Why not? Because when there's two scrolls, they may not be of equal value. Let's say Sefer Bereshit is longer than Sefer Shemot, so it would be worth more in the market value. And therefore, since Shemuel said that one can force the other to split when there are two volumes, then obviously, if I say I'm going to take Bereshit and you're going to take Shemot, we're going to have to make an assessment of the difference between the monetary values of each one, and I can force you to either pay for it or buy me out or buy you out. And so this is a proof that according to Shemuel, we do say God or Agod, right? Because if you didn't say God or Agod, then one should not be able to force each other to split, and no matter, even if there's one scroll or even if there are two scrolls, it wouldn't make a difference. So is that a good proof that Rav Yehuda is repeating what Shemuel said? And the answer is not necessarily. To the Gemara of Shalman, B'sheshenehem rosim. No, maybe Shemuel's entire statement was only when both of them agree. Then, if we agree, and there's only one scroll, we cannot split it because you can't cut it in half. But if we agree, and there are two scrolls, and I agree that, Bereshit is worth $100 more than the Sefer Shemot one, okay, fine, you'll pay me the difference, I'll pay you the difference, then it's okay. But if we don't both agree, then one cannot force the other, even if there are two scrolls, because then you're going to have to evaluate, and someone's going to have to pay. And so it could be that Shemuel does not say God or Agod, and Shemuel only said his law when they both agree to split it, but not when they disagree. And therefore, there's not a proof that Rav Yehuda follows Shemuel. Amar Amemar, Hilchata it dina de God or Agod. Amemar says halacha is, like Rav Yehuda, that we do say, here's the price, either you buy me out or I'll buy you out. When two partners have something that is too small to be split, they can force each other to sell or buy. Amar le Rav Asher Amemar, had Rav Nachman mai, so Rav Asher Amemar, what about the opinion of Rav Nachman? You're just ignoring it? Amar le la shemi ali, kelomar la sebir ali. And the Amemar says, I never heard of it, by which he meant, I don't agree with it. He did hear of it, but he doesn't think that's the halacha, so he's ignoring it. Velo, v'ha rabin bar chinena v'rav dimi bar chinena, shebak lehu abu tarte amhata, chada yada'a afya ubashule, v'chada yada'a pilcha v'navla, v'atu lekamed ravav amar lehu let dina de God or Agod. So is that true that we just ignored Rav Nachman and the halacha is not like him? We have a story of a man named Chinena. Chinena had two sons, Ravin, the son of Chinena, and Rav Dimi, the son of Chinena. And Chinena, the father, died. And he left them two maidservants. Each one had a specialty. One knew how to bake and cook. The other one knew how to spin and weave. And now, what are they going to do? They jointly own these two slaves. Now, they could keep them in a partnership, but obviously one of them wanted to split it in some way. And so they came before Rava, and Rava says, no, there is no halacha of either I buy you out or you buy me out. So you see that Rava said each of the brothers, one of the brothers cannot force the other to buy it, This is, let's set a price and you buy it or I buy it. No, they have to continue the partnership in some way. So you see that Rava follow halacha like Rav Nachman. So Amemad, how come you said halacha is not like Rav Nachman? And the answer is Shanei Hatam, de lemor mi ba'ele tarvaihu, lemor mi ba'ele tarvaihu, ki kamar le shekol at hada v'ana hada, lav god or agod hu. No, this case is different because both of the sons need both things. Everybody needs to eat and everybody needs clothing. So really, both of them needed the services of each of the maidservants. And so therefore, when one of them said, listen, I'll take one maidservant and you take the other, that's not a case of God or agod. If one of them says, listen, we're going to sell both of these. What's the price for both of the maidservants? If either you buy it, if you don't want to buy it, I'll buy them, and they come together, then then halakha is like Rav Yehuda, and one could force the other to do it. But that's not what happened. One of them said, I'll take one maidservant, you take the other. So they're not doing a buyout, they're doing just some kind of a split. But the split is not fair, because the other brother can say, what, you're going to take the one that cooks and I take the one that sews, but I know I want food also. I want the services of both. I want to continue the partnership. If you want to buy me out all together, fine, I'll take all the money and then I can go get my own servants or whatever I'll do with that money. But if you're going to take one and I'm going to take the other, that's not fair. I don't want to do that. And that's why he said that there's no law of God or agod, because it doesn't apply in this case. Not because halacha is like Rav Nachman. In fact, halacha is like Rav Yehuda. וכילה מסר למאמר הכי, והכתבי הקודש תרוויהו מבעליהו, ואמר שמואל לא שנו אלא בכרך אחד, אבל בשני כרכים חולקין. התרגמה רב שלמן בשרסו. Now we ask, is it true that we cannot say that when one takes one and one takes the other, that's not called God or agod? Look at this following case. These words v'chila maseh alamar hachi are in parentheses in the Vilna Shas, but the question is the same whether you have the words or not. We're going to compare the two maidservants to the case of two holy scriptures. Regarding holy scriptures, where we two partners share Bereshit and Shemot, and both of them are necessary, right? Everybody needs both of these scrolls. They're both important. Can't have just Bereshit, can't have just Shemot, so they need both of them. And yet Shemuel said that the way they cannot force each other to split it when there's one, because you can't cut it in half. But when there's two, then they can force each other to split, and they say, what's the difference in price between them? And they split, and one will pay the other the difference in price. So we see here there's a case where both of these items are valuable, and both partners need both of them, and yet one can force the other to say, I'll take one, you take one, and you buy out the difference, or I'll buy you out of the difference in price. So therefore, that should be the same with regarding the two maidservants when he says that we do not say God or agod. Agod or God should apply to this case, where one can say, I'll take one maidservant, you take the other maidservant, I'll pay the difference in price between them. And then, since Rava says we don't say that, that would be a proof for Rav Nachman. So why are you making a difference between the cases of maidservants and the cases of the two scrolls? And the answer is, as we already answered, that Rav Shalman says that Shemuel's statement was only talking about where they agree to split the scrolls. Since they agree, that if it's only one, you can't force each other to split it. You can't split it at all, even if they agree, because then you're going to cut in the middle. But if there's two, then I'll take one, you take the other. If there's a difference in price, we'll pay each other. That's when they agree. But if they don't agree, then one cannot force the other. Even if you say, like Rav Yehuda, that you can make one person can buy each other out, fine. I can say, let's keep the scrolls together. I'll buy both of them, or you buy both of them. Fine, that you can do. Like the two maidservants, you could also do. But if the one didn't say that, and one says, I want to take one and you take the other, then one cannot force the other to split it in that way, because that's not a case of God or agod, because both of them are valuable and both are needed for each of the parties. Tenora banan, madbik adam Torah nevi'im echudim ke'achad divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda omer, Torah b'fnei asman, nevi'im b'fnei asman, uchtuvim b'fnei atzman. Hachamim omrim, kol echad ve'echad b'fnei atzmo. Now that we mentioned back in the Mishnah, the law about splitting holy scriptures, now we're going to get into a long discussion about the proper way to write and improper way to write whole different books of holy scriptures. So the Baraita teaches that a person can attach together Torah, Nevim, and Ketuvim, all as one. According to Rabbi Meir, you can have a whole Tanakh. They didn't have yet books as we have today. They certainly didn't have printing. And the Romans already did invent a codex, which is like a book. It's just handwritten and bound on one side. But this still was not in use by the Jewish community. So the Jewish community was still using scrolls. Now, if you want to make a Tanakh, take all the 24 books of Torah, Nevim, Ketuvim, and stitch them all together into one big scroll. It's going to be a really big scroll, kind of hard to get from beginning to end. But in any case, if you want to do that, it's permitted to do that because they're all Tanakh. You can't go and add other books to it. That would be a prohibition. It's only these books, but you can put all the books of Tanakh together. Rabbi Yehuda, this is good because halacha is like that, and that's why we're allowed to print a Tanakh. Rabbi Yehuda, however, says, no, you have to print them separately. Torah by itself. You can put all 5 books of Torah together, but Torah cannot be together with Nevi'im. You can put all the Nevi'im together, but they have to be separate and cannot be attached to Torah or Ketuvim. Ketuvim can be all together. Certainly they can be separate books, each one. You can make just a Sefer Yeshaya, that's fine. But you can put all the books of Nevi'im, but you can't put Nevi'im and Ketuvim together. Why? It seems because there are different levels of Kedusha. Torah is the highest level of Nevuah. You can't attach that to Nevi'im, because then that's degrading to Torah. So each one, and Ketuvim also, is only Beruach HaKodesh, not the same level as Navi, and therefore they have to be attached as 3 separate scrolls. Hachamim, however, say that every book of Nevi'im and Ketuvim have to be by itself. Obviously not Torah. Torah you can put all together. You have to put it all together. That's the only way you can make a kosher Sefer Torah. So the Torah goes together, but each of the Nevi'im is its own book. It's a separate entity, and therefore has to be written alone. Ve'amar Rabbi Yehuda, Ma'aseh b'Baitos ben Zunin, she'hayta lo shemona Nevi'im medubakin ke'echad al pi Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Yehuda, who said you can write all the Nevi'im together, he said that there was an actual case of someone named Baitos ben Zunin, and he had all 8 of the books of the Nevi'im. We also, till today, we have the 8 books of Nevi'im. You see, Shemuel Aleph and Shemuel Bet are considered as one. They're only Shemuel Aleph and Shemuel Bet because they're rather long, and if you would write them in a scroll, then it's going to be a very long scroll. So it was more convenient to write them in 2 scrolls. So that's why it's Shemuel Aleph and Shemuel Bet. But really they're one Navi. And so Baitos ben Zunin had all 8 books of Nevi'im, 4 books of Nevi'im Rishonim, 4 books of Nevi'im Acharonim, and he put them all together, and that was based on Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So this is a good proof for Rabbi Yehuda. But there's another tradition that this Baitos ben Zonin had each book by itself, not all together, and then that would be a proof for Chachamim. Amar Rabbi Maaseh ve'haviu lefanim Torah ketuvim medubakim ke'achad v'hichsharnuhum. Rabbi says we saw a case where they brought before the sages Torah nevim ketuvim Tanakh all stitched together, and the rabbi said it was kosher. So that's a proof for Rabbi Meir. So now we have a story proving every one of these 3 opinions. Ben chumash lechumash shel Torah arba shitin, v'chen ben kol navi lenavi, uben navi shel shenem asar shalosh shitin, u'masem melemata u'matchil melemala. Now, when you're writing Sefer Torah, between Bereshit and Shemot, between Shemot and Vayikra, and so on, you have to leave 4 empty lines. If you look at a Sefer Torah today, we still do that, right? When you go from Vayikra to Bemidbar, there's 4 empty lines. You can't just write it right away because you have to show that there's a separation. You can put it on the same clef, even on the same column, because it's all part of Chumash, but you have to leave space between. And so too, between Yeshaya and Yirmiyah, you have to leave 4 lines to show that this is a new book. Now, between each of the books of Terei Asad, you have to leave only 3 lines. Each of the books of Terei Asad, really they're different prophets. And so they're separate books, but because they're so small, if you'd write them each as one scroll, they'd get lost. And therefore, we put them all together as one book so that we can keep it. But really, it's one book made up of 12 subsections. Now, the subsections are not as separate from each other as entire books like Ishaya and Yirmiyah, and therefore, between each of the Nevi'im of Terei Asad, we don't leave 4 lines, we leave 3 lines. So they're more connected, but still, it is a separate Navi, and therefore you have to leave some space between them. And what you can also do is end one book at the bottom of one column and start the next book on top. Let's say you finish Bereshit and happen to work out, or you made it work out, that the end of Bereshit is the bottom line of one column. You don't have to then leave 4 empty lines at the top of the next column. Since you're going to the next column, you're going to the next page, therefore you can start right at the top of the page. And the page break is sufficient as a big break that shows that you are going from one book to another. Tenor Banan, הנושא לדבק תורה נביאים וכתובים כאחד מדבק, ועושה בראשו כדי לעגול עמוד ובסופו כדי לעגול היקף. If someone is putting together Torah Nevi'im and Ketuvim all as one, so then he can do that. You can attach them all together. Now, you have to leave enough room, empty parchment, meaning at the beginning of the scroll and at the end of the scroll. At the beginning of the scroll to wind around the pole. Right, here's the pole, and the very beginning of it, it's going to be small. The pole is thin, but you have to leave enough that this has to be the same as the circumference of the pole. So you have to have some empty space. It wouldn't be correct to have writing the writing that would be directly on the wood. Rather empty space, and then the writing would go on top of the back of the parchment. And then all the way at the end, you have to make sure that there's enough room at the end that it would be the empty space, the size of the circumference of the entire scroll when you put it all together. And if it's a whole Tanakh, that's going to be pretty hefty. You think of even a Chumash is already pretty big. A whole Tanakh is going to be even more. And so you have to leave enough space so that you don't have writing on the outermost layer. That wouldn't be respectful. You need, just like a book has a cover, this would be a cover that you'd roll it up when you're not using it, and that's the respectful way to have a whole scroll. And now if you finish a book at the bottom of one column, then you can start the next book at the top of the next column. And if you want to cut it, you can cut it. That's the end of the Braita. We don't understand this last line. My kamar, what do you mean if you want to cut it, you can cut it? Hachi kamar, she im balachato chotech is giving a reason. How come if you finish one book on the bottom of one column, then you don't have to leave empty space. You can start the next one on the top. Because if you wanted to then cut it, you would be able to. So if you had Sefer Yeshaya ends here and Sefer Yirmiyah starts at the top of the next column, you don't have to leave any empty space. You can start right away because that's a total break. In fact, if you wanted to cut it and make it 2 books, you would be permitted to, and that's why it's permitted to start immediately on top of the next column. ורמינהי תחילת ספר וסופו כדי לגול. כדי לגול מהי? אי כדי לגול עמוד קשה היקף. אי כדי לגול היקף קשה עמוד. Now we bring a Braita that seems to contradict this Braita. This Braita over here said that you have to leave a little bit of empty space at the beginning of a scroll to wrap around the pole, and you have to leave more empty space around at the end to wrap around the entire circumference of the whole scroll when it's all rolled up. But this Braita says that the beginning of a scroll and its end, you have to leave enough to wind, which sounds like it's an equal amount at the beginning and the end. So now to wind around what? If it's to wind around the wooden pole, well then there's only going to be a little at the beginning, and there's not going to be enough at the end of it to wind around the entire thing. And if it's enough to wind around the entirety of it when it's all rolled, then then that's too much for the beginning. Because we just learned in the first Baraita that at the beginning you only need a small amount to go around the pole. So how could it be two equal amounts? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak listadin katan. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, there's no problem. This Baraita is talking about two different laws, and even though it's saying it together, but really it's two different amounts. It's saying you have to leave some space in the beginning and some space at the end. But really the space at the beginning is only a small amount to go around the pole, and at the end you need a larger amount to go around the circumference of the entire scroll. Rav Ashi amar ki Tanya hehi besefer Torah kedetanya kol הספרים נגלים בתחילתן ובסופן וספר תורה נגלל לאמצעיתו ועושה לו עמוד אלך ואלך. אמר רבי אליעזר ברבי סדוק כך היו כותבי ספרים שבירושלים עושים ספריהם. Rav Ashi says, I have a different way of resolving the two baraitot. The second baraita that says you have to leave some space in the beginning and the end, and it's an equal amount, that's talking about a Sefer Torah. The first baraita was talking about all other books that you write individually as just one book, or even all of Nevi'im altogether. Why? What's the difference? According to this baraita, all books of scripture are around one pole, and you put the entire scroll from beginning to end around one. Just like today we write Megillat Esther, so it's actually the end of it is attached to the pole, and then you wind it around, wind and wind, and then when you first open it up, you have the beginning of Megillat Esther. That's if you're writing any one part, or all of Nevi'im together, all of Ketuvim together. If it's not a Sefer Torah, then you would write it in that way. But if it's a Sefer Torah, meaning all Chamisha Chumshei Torah all together, then you wind it around two poles, just like we do today. And you attach the beginning of Sefer Bereshit to one pole, and the end of Devarim to another pole. And for each of those, you have a small and equal amount of extra parchment, enough to go around the pole once, and then the written part can go on top of the parchment that's underneath and not on the pole itself. And so that's an important distinction between a Sefer Torah and all others. It sounds like even if they would write a Sefer Bereshit by itself, you'd put it around one pole. Only when you have a Chumash, it's around two poles. And also, Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Sadok says this is how those who write Sefarim in Yerushalayim, that's how they would make their scrolls. That they would, if it was one scroll, it was only around one pole, but if it was around a Sefer Torah, it says le'emsa'ito, around the middle. Middle means that whenever you open it, it's the same as where you left off, which is really important, because when we're using it for Parashat HaShavua, imagine if the whole Torah was around one pole, and then you have to go you're reading Parashat something in Devarim, and the end is attached to the pole. You have to open the whole thing till you get to something in the middle of Devarim. That would be very inconvenient and Torah Sibur. Instead, right, you have two poles, so you can close it up, and wherever you're up to, you can open up to that parasha immediately. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.